Welcome to the webinar series at the Center for Professional Selling at Ball State University. Over the course of the past 3 months, we've done some webinars based on different topics regarding sales and how technology is also shaping sales. In that same vein, today we're going to be talking about how gamification is changing the way sales managers are interacting with their salespeople to try and increase sales effectiveness. It is my pleasure to welcome one of the partners of the Center for Professional Selling at Ball State, Velocity EHS, and I'm thrilled to have Eric Jackson, who is a sales director at Velocity EHS. Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and the audience today.
For sure. Thanks for having me.
Eric, tell us a little bit about yourself and what does Velocity EHS do?
Thank you. Yeah, Velocity EHS, we're in the environmental health and safety software world. So we help safety professionals be more safe and more sustainable inside their normal businesses. And we use software as a service. So we're a cloud-based organization, and we help them with all of their needs along the lines of things like incident management, OSHA compliance with HAZCOM standards, chemical management, those types of things in order to make their workplaces safer and more sustainable in today's environment.
And what is your role at, I did mention sales director, but specifically what does it entail and how did you end up at Velocity EHS?
Yeah, so I'm the director of sales here for our mid-market team. So I have about 100 people on our team here that go out and we try to call as many of the sales professionals as we can and introduce them to our products and find out what kind of needs they have and challenges they have and see how they can leverage our technology to help them in those types of ideas there. Been with Velocity for about 5 years now. Kind of grew up in sales and sales leadership for the last 20 years. Graduated from the University of Chicago with a degree in economics, and probably like most students, really didn't know what I wanted to do with life, but really enjoyed the competitive nature that sales provided, and enjoyed meeting new people, and so kind of a biz dev role kind of made sense, and so I got myself involved in sales. Worked for inside sales organizations, worked my way up into leadership very quickly, and then worked with some bigger companies. So I got to see kind of how bigger organizations have more resources and infrastructure and processes. And then finally came here to Velocity, where I have kind of the best of both worlds, a big enough organization to have the infrastructure to support the selling efforts, as well as an organization that's small enough that your contributions count on a daily basis. So very, very glad to be here and looking to continue to grow my career here at Velocity.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Eric. So one of the things that you mentioned was the concept of inside sales, right? And the last webinar we had was talking about how marketing can help in generating leads through marketing automation and those kind of things. And building up on that, it's just a logical, I guess, extension of that is that the role of the inside sales professional has gained much more importance of late, rather than in the past where they were just there to take orders or just do standard operating procedures. My question to you is that since you've been with dealing with inside sales all along, what are some of the challenges that you face when managing an inside sales team? So people might be familiar with managing an outside sales team, but since this is a new concept, can you give us some more insights into that?
Yeah, no, good question. Yeah, we face a lot of challenges. I mean, I think some of them are the standard kind of sales related challenges that most sales leaders face. Where to spend your time. Do you spend your time more with your high performing people and continue to grow those individuals to hit your sales number? Do you spend time with your core group of people to try to get the core moving in the right direction? Do you spend your time with your lowest performing people and get them ramped up, or do you performance manage those and kind of go with the Jack Welch idea of just terminating the last the bottom 20% and just reloading? So we face all those same challenges in the inside sales arena. And then I would say you add a little bit of the area of redundancy. I mean, I think when people have the view of an outside salesperson, the scenery kind of changes. You get to travel a little bit, and the allure of that can be kind of exciting. In inside sales, you have a little bit of the same old, and so as a sales leader, you got to keep it fun and keep it energized, and have different things inside your organization that helps promote the fun and a sense of winning, to keep people coming back and forth inside the organization. And our past sales professionals, they find that instead of traveling from customer to customer to have these calls, each call can be kind of its own adventure. You never know exactly how that conversation is going to go, exactly where that's going to lead. So having that ability to be dynamic inside the moment is probably our biggest challenge in keeping people motivated to keep smiling and dialing, so to speak, as we grow the business.
Neat. But it's very interesting you talk about this. So as a sales manager, I can easily, or a sales manager or as a director managing a team of salespeople, it can be pretty challenging, right, to keep your people motivated, given the fact that, of course, they don't have the fancy travel that people think external sales is all about, as you pointed out. But it's also the monotony of seeing the same people all the time. So you're maybe in a cubicle and then you get up and you see the same people all the time. Keeping them motivated is something that I guess is something that is constantly weighing at the top of your mind. Is that something that's correct?
Yeah, for sure. Especially in our world here, most of our new sellers here are working on what we call our new business development role. So they're not calling existing customers, trying to grow share of wallet where they have relationships and those types of things with these people that they've built over time and are just trying to get more share of wallet. We're going after brand new business opportunities, and so we find that we measure just about everything here to get an idea of kind of what our world looks like and how much effort it takes to bring on a new sale. And we know that it's about 10% of our phone calls will end in talking with a decision maker, which means 90% of the time our salespeople are calling and making lots of efforts, but not ending in any kind of results. So when you lose or have kind of a non-at-bat 90% of the time, you have to be sure that you're doing things and surrounding your people with enough excitement and enough motivation in order to keep that high, because otherwise those losses will add up and people's egos get bruised a little bit and then they get a little bit of call reluctancy. So we're always looking at ways of keeping people excited and amped up so that they can continue to make that next call and get that one step closer to a sale.
It's very interesting because most of the time when we think of salespeople, people always assume that the only way to motivate them is to give them monetary incentives. But actually it's much more than that, and essentially from what I hear you say is that it's also helping them be successful. Not, of course, eventually they need to make money, but it's about making sure that they are successful and keeping them motivated enough to reach that point where they can make those incentives. And one of the things which I thought was very interesting when we met face to face was the fact that you talked about how you're using gamification to try and keep your people pumped up and motivated. Can you give us a little bit more insight into how you're using gamification at Velocity EHS, and how does gamification look?
Yeah, so for us, we went down the road of trying to find ways in which we could celebrate, as many of the successes that we have along the sales journey. So everything from setting up a presentation to having a presentation happen to sending quotes to eventually closing the deal. And so we looked for ways in which we could make that more of an automated process versus having to have a sales manager run some reports and then then send out a congratulatory email or something like that. And so we ended up looking down this road of gamification and looked at other providers to see if there was ways in which we could automate some of that. And so today what we've eventually rolled into is a way in which we can track on a daily basis and a monthly basis most of our metrics, and then classify our kind of our slides of our gamification by role, so that we have people competing against other people who are in similar roles, similar tenureship, so that there's that positive kind of reinforcement and that positive opportunity to kind of beat your teammates who are in the same kind of role you're in. So no one has a significant competitive advantage, so that it becomes a negative there. And then we broadcast this information all over the place. So we have TVs throughout our organization that will post how many tasks people are making every day, how many appointments they've set, how many they've completed, how many deals that they've closed, what's their percent to quota. We also do that on a team level, so we can have team versus team competitions. We can have individual results that are that have competitions with them as well. And then we'll have small incentives that go with that. So ways in which we can reward people for accomplishing kind of above and beyond kind of their standard goals that they have set for themselves.
So I guess one of the things that, because you mentioned that a lot of your inside sales are also younger people, they're also, I guess, more used to these kind of video games and kind of stuff, and gamification lends itself very well to that competitive spirit that they are likely to have, and it's very similar to how you take a look at playing video games as well. I'm simplifying it, of course, but I guess, is that one of the reasons why you also decided to go with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of great things that people do, and you mentioned earlier about it always doesn't have to be a financial reward for people to do well. There are people that still like to have the recognition and the have their boss be able to say, hey, job well done, congratulations on the deal. And gamification that we use helps us automate that so that the triggers happen automatically. So there's posts. Top performers get recognized on a screen. They can have their own picture. They can put a fun picture up there if they want. We can add music so they can have kind of a theme song if they do something great. And those things that post up, the managers see those things, and then they can also send out the, hey, great job with this, way to go with this. Hey, at our next team meeting, I want you to talk about how you were able to do that. And it really just breeds that positive kind of outlook and the rewards and the recognition, and has people wanting to go back and do more of it. Because, we find that salespeople typically don't do necessarily what's right or what's wrong. They do kind of what they like.
Yeah.
And if we can find ways to tie what they like to do with what we need to get done and then positively reinforce that, we seem to get more of it. So it's a win for us, a way to keep people kind of in that competitive winning mode day in and day out, even though it may take a while for us to get a sale. Sometimes our sales cycles can be 90 days. It's nice to be able to celebrate the successes along the way to a sale.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned last time was something like a century club. So what is a century club?
Yeah, so we look at different ways of saying people that do really well in any certain category can get recognized. So we have a century club. And any given day that any one of our salespeople will make 100 tasks, 100 dials, 100 emails, wow, those types of things, 100 activities. We have a century club that goes off, and there's a little theme that happens, a little song that happens, then we'll post their picture with a congratulations. And it's ways to just keep that positive momentum going and realize that, some days you're going to have, 40 dials and you're going to have, 10 or 15 great conversations. Yeah. Other days you're just not going to get a hold of people, but to have that persistence to keep driving, we think that our Century Club kind of helps people, push through those tough days, knowing that at the end of that, when they hit that button, get a little noise that'll go off and a little thank you and a congratulations.
Okay. Now, that's very interesting, because I guess you have your own ways given the way you work. Now, one of the things you mentioned was that you talked a lot about software as a service. Do you also do a lot of these? Because from my experience with a lot of these companies, you also do have a lot of demos. So are your inside salespeople also responsible for doing demos? And is the gamification linked to how well they set it up and complete it as well?
Yeah, so with our software as a service, we'll have an initial conversation to try to get a needs ID out of our prospective customers. And eventually what we do is we ask them if they'd be willing to go in on a webinar for us, or what we call a demonstration, where we take the needs that we found out, we weave them through a presentation and a demonstration of how our solution can solve those. And so we use the gamification to track how many of those appointments we set and how many of those appointments we actually go through. Unfortunately, not every one of our prospective customers who says, yes, I'll see a demonstration, actually shows up. Some of them, things pop up and they're unable to attend. So we track both not only the show ups, but also just the sets. And anyone who sets, 3 or more in a day, we also have bells and whistles that go off and say, congratulations, you've set 3 demos. Any of our sellers that complete 2 or more demonstrations in a day, we have another bell and whistle that goes off and says, congratulations, you've completed 2 demos for the day. So we try to do our best to use our gamification in all of our processes to reward behavior that's more than what I would consider just kind of a standard day's worth of work.
Yeah. I think it's really cool what you're doing out there. And so my question actually is that, yes, you're using gamification, but when did you decide to use gamification at Velocity EHS?
Yeah, it took us some time. We've been around for over 20 years and been in the SaaS industry for about the last 15 of those. And we've really started using gamification really well over the last 3. We probably, like most organizations, we got a phone call from someone saying, hey, are you interested in gamification? And we're like, no, I don't even know what that is. So I'm going to go with a no. But eventually, after getting a couple of phone calls from them, we said, well, hey, why don't we at least understand it? So we took a call, we took a webinar from the organization. They showed us what they have. We let that simmer, I would say, for the best part of 6 months, and kind of said, you know what, I don't know if we're ready for that. We're not really sure what we want to do with that and how it can help our business. They sent us a bunch of case studies and ROI documents and things like that. And, you realize some of that's, we do the same thing with our customers. So there's always a positive ROI on every software you ever buy. Just ask the person who provides the software, they'll tell you. So we ended up putting that on hold for a while. And then, we had another call from them saying, hey, would you like to revisit this? We're having a promotion on it, type of a thing. And that's when we got serious. We put a team together and we said, hey, listen, if this is something we're going to do, we have to go all in for this. We can't have some of our organization doing it, some of our salespeople doing it, some teams doing it, some not. We got to get support from all of our leaders as well as senior leadership and our VP and president of our company to wire this up and tie it into our sales force that we have so that we can make it work and have all this automated and really get the experience from it and the return on the investment. So it took us about 6 more months of just kind of going through that to finally pull the trigger. And then we started out and unfortunately we weren't perfect with it. We had our first rendition and we started posting things and links would break and slides would come up empty and people were kind of losing faith in it and all it became was a glorified, if someone closed the deal, the buzzer would go off. We got that working really well, but the rest of it just kind of fell flat. And then we went back and did some more training with them. We put some more people in place. We got more of our leadership to be involved in the day-to-day operations of it. And then we kind of went through a second rendition, and now we're kind of on our third rendition where we think we've got it to a point where we feel good about it, but it's a journey. You're never really done with it. You kind of set it, but you got to keep evaluating it and making sure it's fresh and relevant. And so now every quarter we go through and we take a look at all the reports and all of our broadcasts and say, hey, what kind of tweaks do we need to make to keep it fresh and to keep it something that will motivate our team instead of becoming kind of the new normal, where it loses that motivational push.
Now that you've gone through this, or you're going through this as well, Eric, what suggestions would you make for other companies which are being approached by these gamification and are still not sure about it? Because one of the privileges that you have is you've had 3 years to work with this. But other people, again, you mentioned that in your case it was just a serendipity. So the provider called you and maybe it was at the right time, at the right place, and then you got it in. But there could be other people who could be much more proactive, the sales directors who could be proactive about this. So what are some things that they should be aware of? You know what I mean? In terms of what is the right time for them to consider gamification?
Yeah. Selfishly, and because I've kind of been through a little bit, I don't think there's ever a wrong time to consider it. I look at what it does for us. I look at the recognition. I look at the level of sophistication that it now has. It can tie into your social media feeds. We can post, people post or tweet information about our organization. We can have that tweet go across the screen. You can basically, anything you can measure inside your CRM, you can push into this gamification to have real-time kind of evaluations of what you're doing. You also can do team versus team challenges. So there's a link inside this where you can say, I want to challenge this team to this contest for this duration, and it'll do like a countdown and it'll challenge and those types of things. So any organization that has more than just a couple of salespeople, any organization that has 10, 15, 20 salespeople or more, a couple of different teams, I think the consideration is worthy to at least start looking at it. I would say that anything that you do, you do have to realize that once you have it, it would be tough for us to get rid of it at this point. I mean, we have people that are glued to it; they see it every day. It's a constant, ongoing channel where we have about 24 different slides that go on and off, kind of on a 10, 12 second kind of a cadence. And so for us, once you kind of have that decision that you want to do it, you almost have to realize that it's a permanent decision for you. Taking it away would have our people like looking and wondering what the heck we're doing and why am I not recognized anymore, and that's just a bad opportunity moving forward. So my recommendation for people is, I think walking through and considering it, probably no better time than the present to take a look at it, see what it can do for your business. If you get to a point where you think it makes sense, one of the things I wish I would have done or wish I would have access to would be some of the customers that were already using the system to be able to say, how did you set it up? What did you do? Just your normal network of people that you go to for your mentorship program. Anyone who's already done it can kind of help you navigate some of those potholes and speed bumps, because a lot of those are going to be specific to your organization. So what are the things that you measure? What are the things that motivate your team? And then once you do it and make that decision to go ahead and go forward with it, I would recommend having some instant rewards for people that are doing really well. Maybe even more incentives than what you would normally do to get people excited about it and motivated with it. We use a lot of what we call PTO or paid time off. So give someone an hour off on a Friday afternoon and let them go home an hour early if they do certain things. I'm shocked at how much motivation that sometimes has in our business. Or letting someone come in late or have a happy hour with the team if the team does certain things. Those types of things seem to really drive that behavior. And the more often we do that, the more often we get peaks in our gamification results, and ultimately peaks in our sales performance. So those would be some of the recommendations that I would make. And really, I think reaching out to counterparts who have already gone down that path a little bit, and ask them the specific questions you may have, or have them tell you the story that they have, will probably help enlighten people as they're looking forward to potentially using a gamification inside their sales organization.
It's good you talk about this, about keeping downstream. How do you keep them motivated? But what if you happen to be a sales manager who think this is a great idea, but you have to convince the higher ups to actually loosen the purse strings? What would you recommend them?
Yeah, the good news is most of the providers, we use Hoopla over here, they'll provide you with all kinds of ROI templates that you can help out with. And what we ended up doing is we really broke it down to saying, this is kind of our baseline worth of sales. This is the cost of the service on an annual basis. This is the amount of new deals we need to close to pay for it. And when you get into that, I mean, for us, it was really a handful of deals. We close one extra deal per month, it more than pays for our subscription. And then you have the ancillary things. Like we looked at we have a kind of a sales incentive committee here. So we have a committee that puts together and does, monthly contests and rewards our top performers from a sales perspective. And we looked inside their budget and said, hey, can we take a little bit out of their budget to pay for this? And will it kind of reward itself and self-fund by increasing our sales results? And so I think presenting that to your senior leadership, or those who kind of control ultimately the budget, is probably important. I also think having them see a webinar of it and having them understand what it can do. I think sometimes, depending on kind of their experience with gamification, I think it's catching on more and more now, but I think it's still relatively new, where we may have been a little bit ahead of the curve a little bit on it. But I see this thing being something that's going to be fairly normal, especially with the types of sales forces that are out there. We hire a lot of people where this is their first or second job, and they're used to being positively rewarded for just about everything they do. And I think gamification is a great way to do that. And tying that into things like, will it help you with retention? Will it help you with ramping people up? Will it help you with just overall productivity increases? Are all ways in which you can help fund a solution like gamification inside your business.
Actually, Eric, one of the things is we are always going to have some people who are not dealing with inside sales. But if you know the sales process and how it works, then I guess you can also apply it to external sales forces too, right? The key is knowing how your sales process works, what are some key milestones, and then based on that, you can also use gamification for external sales too. So what are your opinions on that one?
Yeah, I worked in some outside sales roles prior, and all of our outside salespeople had their iPhones and their Androids had their CRM system and logged in on that. There's no reason why you couldn't have them also have the link that has the video that goes with gamification on their phones as well. And when they're out in the field and they're either on their lunch break or they're in between visits, if they're logging their calls, logging their sales, those types of things, they could log in, they could see their gamification going off as well. So it's not necessarily only an inside sales tool, but I think you probably have a little bit of logistics that you got to work through on the outside sales team. Is they probably won't see it as often. Our inside sales people, we have probably 15 TVs that are out onside our sales floor. So at all times they can see access to our kind of our Hoopla channel. If you're an outside salesperson, when you're with a customer, you're not going to want to have that going off and have a bong go off if someone closes the deal. But when you get back to your car, it'd be nice to kind of plug in, see what else the team is doing, and you feel more connected to what's going on. And again, feel like your contributions are adding to the overall success of the organization and your team.
Indeed. And I think the key, one of the things you mentioned is the fact that it's if you know your process, right? So I'm assuming that when you had this gamification, that you also had a seamless integration with your CRM system as well. I'm assuming, or is that something that you will have to think about it later on, or that's something you have to think about it even when you're thinking about gamification?
Yeah, most of the time as you're going down the gamification road, the organization you're working with will talk to you about, where do you house all of your data that you'll want to eventually use to have these different gamification slides pop up on your TVs. And so for us, we use Salesforce.com. It integrates really well with Hoopla. We do a lot of customizing with custom objects inside of our Salesforce. So we had to spend a little bit of time kind of massaging our data and massaging our information to get it to work. But the technology is there to make sure that just about any CRM you have, you can end up posting that information. Any repository that you have for information, you can post. They've even gotten to a point where you can post kind of your own reports that you generate if you need to inside the gamification. So if you had to push things in there instead of having automatic, you could do that as well. So, but definitely you want to be able to spend some time thinking about your sales process. What are the measurables that you have inside those? You know, we talk about KPIs all the time. So being able to have those, measure those, and then be able to report on those things in a way in which you can then load into your gamification software.
One last question, Eric, is we talked about gamification. So specifically, how has it helped Velocity EHS achieve some of the objectives that you have set for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of went in with just setting some very baseline type expectations. One of the things that's really important for us is culture. You know, when you're trying to attract the best and brightest of the graduating salespeople from professional organizations and professional schools like Ball State and the like, you have to be able to have an environment and a culture that can attract that kind of talent. And we think things like Hoopla help us with that attraction, with that culture. Giving people an opportunity to win on a daily basis, giving people an opportunity to compete on a daily basis, giving people that recognition of a job well done that happens kind of in real time, we think is critical to our success. That's kind of the one piece that we talk about here, but we also talk about results. You know, we're seeing about a 15% lift in overall activity just from using this software. Having people kind of know where their numbers are all the time and having them post all the time kind of puts a little bit of pressure as well as a little bit of competition in everybody's life at all levels. So people can't necessarily, you know, if you're mailing it in today, your name's going to be on the board as someone who's either not on the board or last place on a board, saying you're not doing very well. And so those types of pressures have amped up our ability to make more phone calls and stay more active and stay more motivated as a group. It also has helped our sales managers as well. You know, one of the things that's kind of interesting is if you don't have KPIs that are being posted all the time, depending on what your cadence is for inspecting that, you could go, you know, maybe a month or so before you understand that you've got a problem with what's going on in your business. You know, for us, every single day we've got results that happen real time. Managers can look and say, wow, I feel like we're a little bit behind kind of our normal amount of either appointments or demos or tasks or sales or whatever the KPI that they're measuring. And we can make real-time adjustments, you know, the next day. You have to be careful not to have too much of a knee-jerk reaction because sometimes a day is just a day, but you can look at those trends very quickly. And all of our sales managers know that we have a certain number of demos that we schedule every day. And if we don't, we got to look into the data a little bit and find out what's going on. So I think it helps us course correct a little bit. It helps us reward kind of our positive performers. We're seeing better results in general, and it helps us breed a culture that has people competing and people winning every day.
Amazing. So what you guys are doing. So again, Eric, I'm really thankful that when you were here that we got a chance to talk about gamification. And again, this is a nascent topic and I'm sure that it's going to be picking up soon much more. Thank you so much for spending time talking to us about it. And I'm assuming that if there are people who ask me questions about where to find a good proponent of using gamification, I can always pass on your coordinates as well.
For sure. Anytime. Anything I can do to help.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eric. Have a great day.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Stay tuned. We'll be having more webinars coming up over the summer period as well.